Today at The Informer, we're here with Steve Van Apperen. Now, Steve's been called the human lie detector. He can sense lie within seconds, and he's had extensive training with the FBI, the CIA, and even the Los Angeles Police Department in how people lie. Steve served as a police officer for 14 years before becoming one of the world's leaders in researching and teaching the art of lie detection. He's conducted behavioural interviews on 81 homicide and 2 serial killer investigations. He's been consulted by various police departments, intelligence agencies and governments. Steve has also emerged as a leading authority on analysing human behaviour, and today devotes his knowledge to helping businesses thrive by increasing profits, improving human rapport and reading clients. So I'm not very paranoid about this one. Steve has also been working on a number of major homicide cases and is consulting on a new television crime series. Steve has even consulted as a person who interviews clients for the Bachelorette. I didn't get a go. Steve, welcome.
Thanks for having me.
Now, Steve, human lie detector. We've heard about the failability, how normal lie detectors, mechanical ones, aren't admissible in court because of their problems. Is a human lie detector any better?
Yeah, look, I teach everyone from intelligence agencies, police departments, how to baseline behaviours, pretty much like what the FBI do when they're training their agents. So how to baseline behaviours, then look for deviations from normative behaviour. So people often won't lie to you, believe it or not. They'll just edit the information they supply you with. So they may be evasive, omissive or dismissive, sidestep the issue, not answer the questions. But the first thing I teach people is to ask the correct question, ask good, direct, probing questions, but watch for changes in behaviour. And also look for whether or not the person is including themselves in the narrative or excluding themselves from the narrative. And we can do that by analysing the content structure of language.
Great. So baseline questions that you would ask, things that you know to be true without doubt. Is that what you're saying there for the baselines?
Yeah, so I might ask somebody, there's 2 parts of the process of any behavioural analysis interview. The first part is establishing a rapport with the person you're interviewing. And there's a good reason why we want to do that. One is we know through research that people are more likely to open up to people they feel comfortable with. Secondly, and these are the 3 top reasons why people confess to crimes, believe it or not. 1 is they like the interviewer. 2, to get it off their chest. 3, they believe the evidence is so overwhelmingly against them that further resistance is futile. So part of the rapport building phase is twofold. One is A, to get the person talking about themselves. B, for me to take a number of observations. So I might ask them questions where historically they have to recall to the past, like, what was your very first job? What was your role there? Blah, blah, blah. Let's just say, 60, 70% of the time they're looking up to the left, recalling that information. Well, then later on when I'm asking them questions about their involvement in a particular homicide or, during the sale, depends what the issue is, then I look for deviations from that normative behaviour. So we have to baseline or benchmark, then look for changes. If you haven't baselined, you're not going to see any change. And that's the first thing we need to do. But also, we need to analyse what they're doing with their hands and their feet and whatnot. See, there are more neural connections between the brain and the hands than any other part of the body. So subconsciously and subconsciously, what we do is we tend to engage in certain behaviours, such as blocking, masking and concealment behaviours. So I'm sure you've watched television. Sometimes you see politicians, they'll be saying something, they'll put their hand over their mouth, or they'll be touching the ear, rubbing the eyes, touching the nose. Well, if you've got an itchy nose, you scratch it, as opposed to just a cursory touch. So what a lot of behavioural scientists believe is we know when we're doing that, we're saying the wrong thing. So it's our subconscious mind thinking, well, we're trying to block that leakage or seepage, but at the last moment there'll be some sort of deflection. So we need to look for that. But we also need to look for whether or not that the question becomes a threatening stimulus which engages that change. I remember years ago interviewing a guy for a rape. Every time we started talking, or I started asking questions about the rape, he would start kicking the table very gently. But then when I changed the subject, he wouldn't talk. Then all of a sudden, I start talking about the rape. So there's something about those questions that created the threatening stimulus, which engaged changes in his behaviour. So we need to look for conflict and contradiction between what a person says and what their body language, in fact, states.
Now, I've never sat so still and been scared to move during an interview as much as I am now, Steve. You consult with the Bachelorette. what sort of questions are you looking for there? Are you allowed to tell us what you're looking for and what excludes or includes somebody?
Yeah, look, in previous episodes, what would happen is the producer would say, look, we'd like you to interview some of the contestants or the bachelor or bachelorette and just get a bit of a feel, because one of the ones that I worked on was I think it was a Bachelor in Paradise, and there was a particular person on that in the cast that basically every time he lied, he'd do what I see a lot of, and a typical shoulder shrug. And sometimes it's so impenetrable, it's so small. But you ask a child a question they don't know the answer to, right? What's the first thing they'll do? They'll lift their eyebrows, they'll shrug their shoulders and put their hands skywards, which is indicative of doubt or uncertainty. Anyway, every time that was one of the things, a lot of masking, concealment, blocking behaviours, sidestepping issue, all that type of thing. So what they did was they got me in to interview him about his social media, and because the fear was, some of the contestants were going on there for the purpose of, building their Instagram accounts and so on. So to determine whether or not they were there for the right reasons, so to speak, as opposed to go there for notoriety or fame.
Mm. Now, as far as you work a lot in the corporate sector as well, with a lot of board executives and things like that, and we've seen prime examples of Enrons and Arthur Andersons and some of the crashes that have happened through less than valued or well-principled decisions. How do you work in those spheres?
So typically, firstly, in two areas. One is in body language, because often, if you see somebody who walks up to a lectern and seems a little bit stooped, not too confident, all the rest of it, because, our appearance, our persona, our image of leaders are usually judged by their body language and how confident and what they say. See, anytime people see a leader and they think, well, they're not displaying, strong leadership skills or communication skills, well then, we tend to doubt the authenticity of the person. So if you're going to mock sincerity, you need to be really good at it, because people can pick it up like that. So I teach people how to use effective body language to demonstrate, confidence and authority and so on. But also, I have had a lot of banks and portfolio managers who will go in and interview CEOs and CFOs of a company. Now, what will happen is these analysts and portfolio managers will go in and ask questions, but of course, who knows more about the performance of the company than the CEO or CFO running the company? So, and don't forget, they're only going to tell you what they want you to know. So you can do all your market research, due diligence, and so on. But at the end of the day, you need to ask the right direct probing questions. So I teach, portfolio managers, analysts how to do that. But also in the HR and recruitment sector, when people are conducting interviews, and see, often, especially in an employment role, people will lie about, length of service, reason for leaving, promotions, positions held, remuneration, all sorts of things. And when I do training, I've got a PhD that I put on the slide. And then I tell people that I purchased it for about $100 US. And if I was to apply for a job using that PhD, there's even a phone number that a prospective employer can ring to validate. And it will even send out a transcript of results of a course I never even did. So we've got to be really aware that deception is a part of life. I mean, everything from look at the reasons we lie to impress, to get ahead, for financial gain, to impress a potential partner. It's part of our life. And in fact, I've seen research that shows if children don't have the ability to deceive, they will be more likely to be deceived by others.
Yeah, it's funny, in developmental psychology, when children begin to lie, they've suddenly just developed their sense of self and just realise then that not everyone thinks as they do. So that's where all of a sudden it starts, and that's why the honesty of children is so blatant, because they believe everyone thinks like they do. We've got to wind it up, Steve. It's been fascinating. One last thing, what is the biggest tell? What can our viewers take away today to look for when they feel they're being deceived?
Well, number one, I can give you a couple, but number one is, has the person answered the question? So firstly, you need to ask the direct question, but more importantly, have they answered the question or have they sidestepped the issue? Number two, are they taking ownership or creating distance, disassociation and separation? A lot of the homicide cases I've worked on, what I often see is the suspect will exclude themselves out of the narrative. So if I said to you, what did you do this morning? Neurologically, through sensory input and memory, you tell me what you did, what you heard, what you felt, what you saw, conversations that took place. Why? Because you lived through them. Whereas if you're fabricating or embellishing or creating a memory that never existed, for every one lie you tell, you have to invent another 2 or 3 to protect yourself from the first one and to maintain the continuity of the lie. And that becomes really hard. It creates cognitive load. And when that happens, when people are lying, we see, prolonged eye closure. In fact, research shows that when we lie, our blink rate increases 6 to 8-fold after the delivery of the deception. So a lot of people think when somebody's lying, they'll actually stare, look away. Well, research shows the opposite. They'll actually stare them down because they're looking at your response and they're thinking, did they believe did they believe the deception? Did they believe the lie? So, and finally, look for conflict or contradiction. Look for masking, concealment, blocking behaviours.
Great. Thanks so much, Steve. I'm going home to ask my 9-year-old daughter about the chocolate that went missing, and there's going to be some hard answers coming. Steve Van Eperen, thanks so much for today. Loved it.
My pleasure.